Lush, Executive Editor at Hub Culture, and it's Davos, it's 2026, and I am absolutely delighted to be here with JP Douglas Henry. How are you?
I'm very well, thank you.
Thank you for stopping by the studio. So you are the Managing Director of Sustainability and Resilience at DLA Piper, one of the world's largest law firms and one of the world's largest sustainability practices. Now, you don't have to comment on this, but I know that inside the Congress Center, there's only about 4 sessions officially on climate, and resilience has become the new word that people use instead of climate. So I wonder what your thoughts are as you have walked around Davos. Just what struck you about the sustainability question here?
Well, Edie, I can't possibly comment on resilience, you'll understand. What struck me is that most of the discussions have centered around sustainable investment, sustainable practices, sustainable transition, weathering a world of ambiguity, being resilient, coping with change. Because geopolitically we're seeing massive change. And it's not that the world hasn't seen it before, it's that it's happening at pace. And the great powers are taking positions on issues in new ways that we just haven't seen before. Using trade, using bilateral relations, multilateral institutions that perform functions after the Second World War that have preserved peace globally in ways that we just have not seen.
So I wonder what kind of world we're seeing, because we are seeing this world in which the former great powers are acting differently, yet they're still powerful. China, the United States. We also have the sort of rise of middle powers, as well as a geographical split of power. We have places like the Middle East, where I know you do a lot of work with, places like India, with these rising middle powers. We had Mark Carney from Canada calling for some of these middle powers to act together. What does that tell you in terms of when we think about climate and sustainability?
Well, it's a great metaphor for what we term the two-speed sustainability world.
What is that?
Well, we have some countries taking the position that climate change is not real. It's the great green scam.
I think we heard that in the speech yesterday.
We did.
Trump.
It's like the South Sea bubble.
Right.
It's not real. It's going to burst.
Right.
And we have others. Small island states, for example, saying this is real, this is an existential threat for us. Because when the tide comes in,
we lose our country.
We lose incrementally parts of our home. And then we have others in the middle who take a pragmatic view and say, well, we've got until 2050 to reduce our emissions to 1.5 degrees. We can't do this overnight. We've got to do it step by step. And we've seen varying degrees of engagement way. But what's striking about it is if you're a business standing back looking at the great powers and now the middle powers, fighting it out politically, what do you do?
So what do companies do? What should companies do acting in this geopolitical environment?
Well, if you're a company and you're global, even if you're not global, but you've got customers on the internet, which means you are online global, you've got a problem, because in places like the US, your climate change reporting obligations are very different to what they are in the UK and Europe or Canada and Australia. And what you can and can't do in the green space differs as well. If you divest assets in some places, you can be accused of being anti-competitive. If you hold on to them in other places, you're not fulfilling your duty to reduce your emissions. So you're caught between a rock and a hard place. And as lawyers, we're called upon regularly to advise clients, what do we do? And the short answer is, you have to comply in both places. You have to do your best to make your filings on a geographically legitimate basis. We live in a globalized world, but what this is doing is it's forcing companies to shrink back into geographical centres that correspond to their regulatory obligations. And that goes against all the laws of economics and,
Right.
and theory that globalization brings economies of scale and synergies. So it's difficult for business to navigate. But the reality is most businesses are doing it. And they're getting on with life.
Right.
Sustainability and ESG has been written out of most online publications and filings that companies make, but quietly in the background they're getting on with due diligencing their supply chains, reporting about the steps they're taking to make their business more resilient, because they're operating in parts of the world where the temperatures are going up to 50 degrees or more, or where the sea level is encroaching on their borders. They have to do it.
So you recently acted pro bono at the International Court of Justice. Tell me about that case and put it in the context of this change in what we're seeing in terms of geopolitics.
Well, the ICJ decision on the responsibility of states when it comes to climate change derives from a question that was referred by the United Nations General Assembly. All 192 member states, including the US under President Biden, asked the court a simple question: do states have obligations in relation to climate, and if so, what are they? That reference was made in March 24. The court ruled in July 25 there was a change in administration in the US. The ruling was to the effect that yes, states do have obligations under the Paris Agreement on climate change, which the US recently withdrew from under President Trump's executive order to do so. But the court went further and said they also have these obligations under a host of other environmental conventions, law of the sea, customary international law, and importantly, human rights. So what you have is a ruling from the World Court telling states that they have obligations to mitigate climate change, reduce emissions. And it's not just their obligation, it's an obligation on private actors, which is
So
a
companies as
euphemism
well.
for companies.
Right.
And if they don't do that, then they're exposed to lawsuit. As an interesting statistic, there are roughly, according to the Sabin Centre, 3,000 climate lawsuits globally. Guess where most of them are?
United States?
The United States has 2,000 of them.
Okay.
It remains to be seen what happens off the back of the ICJ ruling as to whether claims are brought either against states for not doing enough. We saw the Ogenda decision in the Netherlands to that effect, or whether claims are now brought increasingly against private actors, in other words, companies, for not doing enough.
Was it helpful for the small island states to have this ruling? Because it seemed at the time to be pretty important. For countries like Timor-Leste, Tonga, Solomon Islands, they now have to turn this ruling into action for themselves and presumably again acting or bringing suits against other companies or other states. What would you think a next step or the next steps might be?
Well, typically, when you've got an ICJ ruling of this sort that clarifies what the law is, you take it back to the General Assembly and you get a resolution off the back of it. Now, whether that's practical or not remains to be seen. The pragmatic position for private actors in the meantime, companies, is to follow the money. You know, while the great powers and the middle powers and now the island states fight it out, what does business do? It's going to take years to resolve.
Right.
Business, the market, follows the money. And if you look at renewables, massive investment in renewables, you look at what...
Despite what we heard from President Trump at Davos.
Well, it was interesting hearing from President Trump in his speech, because one of the things he said was he's just approved massive investment in small modular reactors.
Right.
Now, nuclear is an alternative to fossil fuels.
Right.
Now, it's clean energy, albeit controversial. The other thing he referred to was wind farms. Now, the US is the second biggest wind energy contributor in the world.
Right.
He also referred to rare earth minerals. Greenland's full of rare earth
Despite
minerals.
the fact that he said there weren't any there.
There are lots there, but there are also in other places, in China, in Africa. He recently signed a deal in Australia, where I come from. Now, rare earth minerals is another name for transition critical minerals. It's the newest hot thing. Everybody wants them.
Right. And they want them for?
batteries.
Right.
Because you need minerals, rare earth minerals, cobalt, lithium, others, to fuel batteries. The only reason you need batteries is because you need to transition from fossil fuels to electrification. So there is money to be made. So the takeaway for me from Davos is whether you believe in climate change or not, whether you can say you do or not, because you might get caught in the political crossfire, follow the money. Because whoever turns out to be right, there's money to be made.
Excellent advice, JP. Thank you very much for stopping by the Hub Culture studio here in Davos, and I'm Edie Lush.